Hello all of you beautiful people, Jules here for Whatculture.com, and if there's one thing that I absolutely love about cinema, it's that for all the explosions, the bells, and the shiny CGI whistles, films can hit you hard with an underlying or even on-the-nose message which will stick with you for ages after viewing. Now, you know what, it doesn't even matter if the message is delivered delicately or just out and out screamed into your face, as long as it's clear and relevant. I mean, the 1978 Dawn of the Dead wasn't exactly subtle in its message about consumerism, but it is still as relevant today as it was then. Now, all because it was clear in what it was trying to get across. However, the films on this list, well, they completely bungle their through-line ideas so much that they end up providing evidence directly opposing what they're actually trying to say. So let's try and untangle all of these messy threads, as I'm Jules, this is Whatculture.com, and these are 10 movies that contradict their own message. Number 10. Sucker Punch. The intended message is that female empowerment is necessary in modern cinema. The message it displays, that female empowerment is a fantasy. Zack Snyder's action thriller was one of the most divisive movies of 2011, with many criticising it for its style over substance approach. However, the director claimed that it was actually a clever lampooning of a perceived nerd culture which sexualizes women and is a fight back against this line of thinking. The problem was that the film sets itself within the female lead's fantasies, meaning that while the film was intended to be a feminist action film as she and her friends fight off sleazy male evils, the events only take place in her make-believe world. Plus, Zack Snyder actually ended up giving audiences what he was actually chastising them for, offering up scantily clad women for audiences to leer over, so it's actually confusing to call this a film that champions women when it's actually being delivered to a rabid, horny teen male audience. Number 9. Passengers. The intended message, love is all you need. The real message, but apparently you don't need consent. This hotly debated sci-fi romance revolves around a man, Jim, who accidentally is woken up from hypersleep 90 years too early, and in order to stave off loneliness, he wakes up fellow passenger Aurora to share his misery with. Clearly, Passengers was written to be an affecting romance about the power of togetherness, and that at the end of the day, nothing else matters except the person that you fall in love with. Unfortunately, this premise is actually built on a false foundation, because how can this really be a love story when it's missing one basic facet? Consent. Aurora enters into a relationship by deception with Jim, unaware that he was actually the one to wake her up. Things go well for a while, but once she finds out the truth, she's naturally revolted. By the film's end, however, she of course comes around, and in a rather tone-deaf display of quasi-Stockholm syndrome, she eventually agrees to live out her days with Jim rather than re-enter stasis when Jim manages to fix a stasis pod. When you strip the veneer off of this piece, it is shockingly creepy, and one that really doesn't sit well with the film's intended tone of togetherness at all costs. Number 8. Batman Begins. The intended message, killing is unacceptable at all costs. The real message, killing is fine if the good guy is the one doing it. One of the key tenets of Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight saga is that his Batman is supposed to be stringently adhering to the rule of no killing. The film paints Batman as a morally righteous protector of the innocent who won't kill at any cost. And yet, the film quite blatantly shows him causing the deaths of many a man. This hypocrisy is best exemplified by an early scene where Bruce refuses to execute a criminal at the behest of Ra's al Ghul. Minutes later, though, Bruce makes his escape by burning down the League of Shadows temple, and it quite clearly causes countless people to burn to death or suffocate. The much-debated climax also makes the film's morally right depiction of Batman seem quite disingenuous. Bat leaves Ra's al Ghul to die on a derailing train, smugly quipping, "I won't kill you, but I won't have to save you." Considering he organised the circumstances through which Ghul's death came about, he most definitely killed the man by any basic legal logic. And yet this wouldn't be problematic at all if the Nolan movies weren't so obsessed with painting the Dark Knight as a paragon of the perfect virtue. Number 7. Forrest Gump. The intended message, optimism and hard work will ensure a happy life. The real message, never question anything in order to have an easy life. Upon watching Forrest Gump for the first time, you probably figured that this was just a simple, sweet, charming movie about a young, charismatic man whose optimistic outlook and steadfast work ethic allowed him to live a fulfilling life despite his issues with learning. However, watch it again as an adult and you'll find a totally different story being told. This isn't a tale about a man working against the odds with all he's got, it's about shutting up and doing what you're told without questioning anything. By blindly following orders, Forrest stumbles from success to success, often benefiting from a conservative political lifestyle, while at the same time watching a liberal-leaning friend in Jenny hit downfall after downfall. Now don't get me wrong, there is still a ton of charm to this film, it's just that the core message about never giving up is actually more along the lines of never question anything. Number 6. I Feel Pretty. The intended message, self-esteem is incredibly important. The real message, attractive people can't have self-esteem issues. So, Amy Schumer's new comedy film revolves around Renee, who after hitting her head in an accident, believes that she's far more beautiful than she actually is. The gag, of course, is that her newfound confidence and self-esteem have a huge impact on her quality of life and overall personality. And on the surface, it is not a terrible message at all. However, when it comes to addressing the confidence issues that plague attractive women in our society, the film really drops the ball. Here we see instances of the project teaching its audiences that attractive women aren't allowed to have self-esteem issues, even having Renee say that she will punch her friend Mallory because she begins to open up about the difficulties of her life. Now let me tell you, just because you are handsome or beautiful, it doesn't mean that you are immune to problems. I'm not saying this about myself because I'm clearly a 6 out of 10 male, but I know people who struggle daily with confidence and social issues that are brought on by this. So the film saying that you are not allowed to have it because you look nice is very disgusting indeed. Number 5. Revenge of the Nerds. The intended message, nerds are sweet and misunderstood. The real message, these guys are actually rapists. The Revenge of the Nerds franchise is, on the face of it, a series of movies focused on the escapades of a group of misunderstood social misfits who plot to overthrow their jock bullies and inevitably get the girls. Unfortunately, the 1984 original is a rather awkward sit-through today, if only because the film so blatantly derails its own attempted portrayal of the nerds as nice, sweet guys deserving of respect and affection. I say this because there's a scene in which nerd protagonist Lewis wears jock Stan Gable's party costume and pretends to be him whilst having sex with Stan's girlfriend Betty. This most certainly qualifies as rape by deception, given that Betty thought that she was having sex with Stan, though the movie attempts to hand-wave the issue by showing that Betty enjoyed her romp with Lewis. Even so, having these goofball air-quote charmers tricking women into sex is not something which paints them with any sympathy at all, and when viewed in isolation is not endearing, it is a felony. Number 4. Juno. The intended message, unplanned pregnancy isn't the end of your life. The real message, unplanned pregnancy isn't a big deal at all. On the face of it, this Oscar-winning drama about the titular teenager's unplanned pregnancy is a life-affirming film which assures youngsters that such an unexpected event will not mean that your life is over, which itself is a brilliant message considering the undeniable pressures that young women in this situation must have to face in a day-to-day environment. However, because the film is so desperate to try and be a quote machine, it actually veers too strongly into the realms of pregnancy isn't a big deal at all. The film as a whole is just too hip and breezy about an event that can and most likely would stick with young mothers long into adulthood and quite likely colour their trajectory of their lives. Here though, it seems that as long as you've got a cool indie soundtrack and a head full of quips, you'll be absolutely fine, which isn't a healthy message. Number 3. 50 Shades of Grey. The intended message is that BDSM is a healthy component of a loving relationship, but the real message it portrays is BDSM gives misogynistic assholes license to abuse women. The 50 Shades of Grey movies clearly want to think that they are presenting an image of sex positivity and how that BDSM, if performed safely, can be a healthy sexual fetish. However, on top of all of that rather free-spirited thinking comes a huge dollop of creamy asshole in the form of Christian Grey. He frequently is depicted as a jealous, controlling prick who uses his red room, which is a playroom filled with BDSM toys, as an outlet for his unresolved childhood trauma that involves his drug-addicted mother and statutory rape at the hands of a family friend. BDSM here doesn't so much seem like a healthy component of a loving relationship as it does as a means for Christian to get air quotes revenge on women for how they've wronged him in the past. The message at its core is about people being able to be sexually liberated, but here, the emotional manipulation that goes with the ensuing relationship is as toxic as you can get. Number 2. Grease. The intended message here is that opposites attract, but the message it portrays is that you need to change everything about yourself to make love work. On a surface level, Grease seems to be a charming, typical story about opposites attracting, with bookish, square Sandy falling for extrovert greaser Danny. And over the course of the movie, we watch them resolve their differing attitudes to life. Except this is completely upended by the movie's ending, where Sandy shows up in a sexy black outfit and has now converted her hair into a rather wacky perm and now smokes for good measure as well. Brilliant. She has changed herself entirely for the whims of Danny, and it's celebrated like some wonderful triumphant moment of self-discovery despite being about as conformist as you can actually get. Therefore, the message actually reads, opposites do attract as long as you're willing to change everything about yourself for the other person. Good. Brilliant. And number 1, Rambo. The intended message here is that war is hell. The real message, though, is that war is entertainment. Though the first Rambo movie, First Blood, was a damning indictment of the toll that war takes on the human psyche, by the end of the film's franchise, it's basically turned itself into a farce. Even when 2008's Rambo claimed that it was going to offer a more cerebral affair, it still completely lost its message with mixed approaches to violence and gratification. In the first 2 acts, you do get that proper build, and the strain our hero is under is shown quite well, but when the 3rd act kicks in, it is a comedy. As Rambo rips out guts, knocks heads off, and explodes an entire truck full of soldiers with a mounted 50 cal, audiences are clearly supposed to pump their fists and cheer for Rambo's killing spree. The first film had 1 death, hence it being called First Blood, but here it takes the thoughtful approach to what it takes to break someone, and instead slaps gore and viscera all over the place and whoops and hollers like we're in the bloody Expendables.